Welcome, one and all, to the very first daily podcast. This is November 20th, 2021. Now, I just want to say a couple of things before getting into it. That the videos that will be posted on this channel will be podcast videos, oracle reading videos for the week, the month, and the astrological season at the board seven times. Those types of videos. The other videos and with the astrological season, the video with the card pull, probably. I can't promise anything too much. But just know that the other videos, including my songs and including the upcoming Christmas album, will all be on my other channel. So look for those videos there. Now, before I really delve into the meat of what I want to talk about, I want to talk about and go through some of the things that happened on this day in history. Back it up. Now, actually, the reason why I'm doing this podcast is because I'm huge when it comes to consistency, and I was thinking, just I would do it every day, once a week, because there's holidays and any other thing, and I want to take the most advantage of things and resources and producing videos and everything as I can. So that's why. So, this day in history official. So, November 20th, the Nuremberg trials begin in the year 1945. In 1903, Tom Horn is hanged in Wyoming for the murder of Willie Nickel. And you notice in the description, I have all the links below of all these things, and so you can go look at this information on your own if you want to. And I'm only naming several historical things that happened, not all of them, but in 1923, Garrett Morgan partons 3 position traffic signals. So I'm kind of guiding you through. So, then famous people born today are, well, first and foremost, the president of the current president, Joe Biden, who became president on the 20th of January of this year. Robert F. Kennedy, Bo Derek, Joe Walsh, Sean Young, Joe McHale, Dabo Swinney, and many other names. And then I just want to cut to it. The quote for today is by Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Be yourself. That is so important because, we look to others and we want to be somebody different, and you can't. You can only be, you can try different things. You can, put on different impressions where you can, do other things in people's shoes, but ultimately it comes back to you and falling in love with yourself. Not only that, your gifts, your identity, your personality, the things that you don't like about yourself, accepting, probably embracing of that, and turning your quirks, things that you think are just so alien, so freakish about yourself, into quirks. So that's so important. So, that's that. Now I'm going to get into today's short story. So notice these are general categories. So the short story is Rachel, by Rachel Ozingelowski. I'm butchering her last name, but it's Suzanne. That's what it's called, and I'm going to read it to you. So here we go. I first saw her at a party sitting among the Bohemians, all singing, all smoking, all intense with their words. She leaned forward with a glass of red wine in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She spoke as if in secret, telling them everything she knew of social injustice and political corruption, all the wrongs that they were certain in their hash-filled haze they could set right. Stuart came from his bedroom, hugged me, took my suitcase and rag coat before sitting softly beside her on the couch. His arm hung loosely around her shoulder as he watched her speak. This was the girl he had told me about. The one, he said, Suzanne. They took me in for several weeks, and their two became three. We talked feverishly into the morning until the last drop of alcohol. He was a well-funded writer. She was trying to make it as a painter. I had been crashing with friends trying to finish my manuscript, but mostly I was drinking too much and running out of money. She was neither coy nor hesitant like girls I had known, the ones who pretended to know less than they did, who sat with perfect legs pointed toward garrulous, unkept boys, quietly waiting for the moment one would want to take her home. Stuart and Suzanne glided into the bedroom. Notice, if it's spelled Suzanne, it's pronounced Suzanne. Susan is Susan. Notice that. Stuart and Susan glided into the bedroom, arms around each other's waists, her lips like flower petals against his ears. I ached for her. I slid under the blankets on the old plaid couch. I couldn't sleep. I lit a cigarette. I thought of them together until I drifted into a drunken sleep. She was beautiful in the morning, boiling water for coffee and making eggs. taking drags from a joint at perfect intervals. Without Stuart, I was speechless in her presence. I wrote in my notebook with a heavy head and waited for him to wake. She placed the coffee and eggs before me. Her slender brown fingers touched everything with a tenderness my heart could not bear. I wrote about her. 6 months after I first saw her, we were standing at the train station, waving goodbye to Stuart. He was leaving for Paris for a month to write, a graduation gift from a father he barely knew. Be good, he said to Suzanne, brushing her soft black curls behind her ears. I'll be back, he said to me with a wink and a pat on the shoulder. Suzanne invited me to stay in her family's home on the coast of Maine to finish my manuscript. You can write, she said. I can paint. I won't bother you. The small white house stood at the shore. Wooden stairs led to a deck which gazed at the ocean, and as I followed her up the stairs, the wind forced waves to crash against rocks, showering us as Suzanne turned the key. Our shoes clacked against the wooden floor. I welcomed the silence after several nights of going away parties for Stuart. She showed me to my room, a perfectly tiny space with a twin bed and desk. Her room was right next to the door, our beds on opposite sides of the same wall. The kitchen cabinet was filled with wine and liquor. Susan pulled out 2 coffee mugs and filled them with bourbon. Welcome, she said, raising her mug to mine. The wind calmed. The clouds danced apart, and the sunlight stretched its way into the kitchen, where they sat on stools, sipping, smiling in silence. The bourbon warmed my tongue and melted its way down my throat, settling in my belly. She watched me for what felt like eternity, and I was desperate to find anything worth saying. I shooed away every worthless thought in my mind and felt relieved when she walked toward the record player. The back of her dress scooped low to her waist, and I fell in love with her back. I wanted to go to her and touch the back of her neck, running my fingers all the way down. I wanted to drop to my knees and kiss the small of her back. I wanted to make her forget Stuart. I swallowed the bourbon whole. She put on a Miles Davis record and swayed her hips, snapping her worn fingers. Her thrift store gems sparkled in the sunlight. I lit a cigarette and poured more bourbon. Dance with me, she said as she swirled in my direction. I can't. I took a long pull from my cigarette and my bourbon. I tapped my foot to the beat as she danced her bare feet toward me. She finished off her bourbon and took a pull straight from the bottle. She wrapped her feathered scarf around my neck and left. Her perfect teeth, her perfect eyes. My body weakened against her gentle tug, and she pulled me up to my feet. We danced, and I was lost. There was no house, no ocean, no floor beneath my feet. There was only us, Our foreheads pressed together. I closed my eyes, never wanting to look up as I pulled her close, and she let me. Her head rested against the deafening beat of my heart. I let my fingers get lost in her hair, and she looked up at me and stared. We swayed until after the record stopped. The house returned, and the wooden floor creaked with every movement. I moved to the kitchen table and lit another cigarette. I'm drunk, she laughed and swirled to the sound of wind and waves. I smiled and looked into my mug. She flipped the record over and slouched onto the couch, sitting with her feet outstretched. She painted her toenails burgundy. I tried to write, but it was all useless drivel. I should not have come, I thought. Why have you been friends with Stuart for so long? She asked as she painted her smallest toe. I don't know. We've been friends since we were kids. I've never really thought about not being friends with him, I suppose. He told me that you were the smartest person he knows. I suppose Stuart needs more friends. My attempted joke was met with silence. She sat upright and patted the seat next to her, and like a dog I moved without thought, only sheer delight that she wanted me near her. We finished off the bottle, and she told me about her family, her parents' divorce, and her older brother who died in the war. She leaned her head on my shoulder as we passed the bottle back and forth. The muted trumpet sang to the ache of this moment, and I wondered how it knew. I brushed back the lonely hair that rested on her forehead. She smelled of tangerines and bourbon and nail polish and everything I could love forever. It was still dark when I awoke. Her sleepy head rested on my chest. I had to go to the bathroom, but I stayed still, staring at the softness of her hair, her skin taking in every inch of a moment I did not deserve. She woke as the sun centered and walked into the bathroom, smoothing her dress and yawning. I made coffee, setting out a mug for each of us. I took my coffee and throbbing skull to my room to write. I pissed in a jug periodically, so as not to have to face the pain of her beauty. We worked all day. She painted at her easel by the window facing the sea. I wrote in my room in the evenings we ate and drank. She showed me her work. I read to her the bits I was not afraid to share. She was a compassionate reader with a talent for showing me where I had written too much or too little. She had the same disdain for useless words that I did, though it did not seem as excruciating to her. When we sat close, I could smell the oil paints she sat painstakingly with all day, painting the red and orange and pink sunset, the moment that typically marked the end of our work. At sunset, we cooked together and sat like husband and wife at the dinner table. And we danced. Every night we danced. She did not need to ask anyone. It became my role, and I accepted the part. One last night in the house, I could not sleep. I thought of Suzanne and the love I could not give to her. Stuart would come home. He would ask her to marry him. She would say yes. They would have children. our lives would drift apart. I would visit at Christmas and comment on how big their children were growing, how beautiful Suzanne's expecting belly looked. I would congratulate Stuart, a job well done. She was packing her paints and easel when I came into the room. I placed my suitcase by the door. The sun was barely winning its fight against the darkening clouds. We walked to the shore and sat, with legs stretched toward the sea. The gulls mewed and circled the ocean. Suzanne wrapped herself in her paisley shawl, taking a drag from a joint. "It's so beautiful," she said, passing the joint to me. "It is," I said, taking a long pull, squinting my eyes toward the ocean and waiting for the rain. The poem of the week, the poem of the day by Robert Frost, which is called Acquainted with the Night. It goes something like this. I have been unacquainted with the night. I have walked out of rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat, and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, an unearthly height, our luminary clock against the sky, proclaimed that time was neither wrong nor right. I've been well acquainted with the night. Poem was that story. Okay. And now what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be moving on to the subject